We're live. It's even before 7. It's 6:58 officially. Pizza. Staying on Niner. What's up, guys? Tonight we are going to talk about hopefully a couple things. One of them is a video that I just posted up with the cam testing on the 5.3 liter Gen 5 L83, which is really cool because this thing started out very powerful, especially if you compare it to a Gen 3 or a Gen 4 motor. So the thing started out very effective right off the bat because it has lots of good things going for it. And I was and Brian Tooley and I, they're the guys that did the those are the cams that we use. We use stages 1 through 4 for the L83. And Brian and I have been talking about this for a long time, since way back when I first ran my 383, and even before that, because we were talking about about how good they are, and he was concerned that it might be really difficult to get cams that are going to make either are going to make a lot more power than stock, or he was also worried when they first started going into development from the testing that he'd done on some of the other manufacturer stuff, is that you can get a power gain, but it's such a big trade-off in other stuff. So they worked very hard, obviously, to do what they do what they do, and they were able to make some pretty impressive power. The thing that I like is that they're able to get gains, and these things are making impressive power numbers with mild cam timing. And I like the fact that the VVT allows it to like have really good power down low and at the top, and obviously in the middle. If you look at the specific torque outputs of some of these things, they're pretty impressive. Now, obviously, the L83 has high compression, has really good cylinder heads. It's got a good intake manifold. It's got direct injection. It's got a lot of stuff going for it that also help enhance that specific output. But the camshaft is a big part of it. And as we see from that particular test, if you guys haven't taken a look at the video, you should. If you see from that test, there are still gains to be had. And again, just like with the LS, that's because they already have all of these other things. They already have compression. As a matter of fact, more compression than an LM7 and then the LC9 or the L33. More compression than that, much bigger, better flowing heads than any of the cathedral port stuff. They have, let's see, compression, and they have cylinder head. They've got a really good intake manifold that I'm sure is every bit as good as the truck manifold or the Trailblazer SS. And then obviously the direct injection, which kind of allows the compression, and they respond really well. They work very well on the 85, which we ran all of this testing on. In fact, Chevrolet all but recommends you do that by giving people 2 different power levels, 2 different power ratings that they rate that thing at. It's like 355 and 380. And so anybody that sees the higher number, I don't know if you're anything like me, I definitely want that higher number. So if you can run it on the 85, obviously it's able to do that. And that's what we did in the testing, which worked out really good. So stages 1 through 4 or 1 through 3 can go in with the factory available piston to valve clearance. And I'm sure you guys know that the L83 of all of the Gen 5 motors has the least amount of piston to valve clearance. So the bigger ones, the L86 and the LT1, the 6.2 liter stuff, you can put bigger cams in them. And that's unfortunate for the 5.3, although it is smaller, and so maybe it will want smaller cams. And judging by the amount of power that we got in that testing with those cams, there's plenty of power to be had, especially with the exhaust kings. What's up? All cams are turbo cams. My stock cam and my 508 sure does well with a 70mm turbo. You can run boost with a stock cam. We've done that many times. The thing that's interesting, if you haven't tried it yet, exhaust kings, if you add a camshaft to that thing, if you have a stock HO cam in it, and you add a camshaft, really at this point, almost any camshaft, any of the Alphabet cams, any of the small cams, obviously the Extreme Energy 274 cam, but even something smaller than that, you would pick up a lot of power at the same boost level. So that's something to think about. But the stock cam idle's nice, and having a turbo just adds more power. So I can see, and I especially noticed this after we ran turbos on so many of the stock LS motors, like we ran them on the 4.8 and 5.3 and the 6.0. And when you run it on a stock motor, it's nice. The thing idles like a stock motor does. It's like whisper quiet. It has everything going for it. And then it just makes like a gob of torque and a gob of horsepower. So the stock stuff, there's definitely something to be said for that. So the L83 has the least amount of piston to valve clearance, but I got a question for you. Here's a little, I don't know, a little quiz or a little survey. how many people would be willing to take the heads off and machine the valve relief? And the interesting thing is on the L83 is you don't actually have to use a valve notching tool. According to Brian, where the valve would hit the piston is not, you don't need a valve pocket there, even though in some of the videos I showed a valve pocket. That piston that I showed with the valve pocket, it actually was an LT1 or an L86. But on the 5.3, all you have to do is grind off a little bit of the biggest part of the dome on the 5.3 piston, and you don't have to get rid of very much of it. It just, the valve just, just barely doesn't clear it, so you can get rid of some of it. So how many of you guys would be willing to do that? Take the heads off and machine that so that you could put that stage 4 cam in there. And I think that that's something I might think about if I'm going to talk to Brian about doing a big bang on one of these motors. Probably mine will be the sacrificial one. But since we take it apart to put ring gap in it anyway, I think why not trim a little bit of that off, do a video and show you guys how to do that, how little that you have to take off. We'll mark it maybe and show you, like what I was thinking about is we'll mark it with clay and then mark it with a Sharpie, so you can, we'll clean it all up and mark it with a Sharpie so you can see how much you have to take off. Brian's telling me that you can just do it with a Dremel or anything, and that it's not hard at all. So that will be interesting. And then we do what we do on these big bang motors. Maybe do ported heads on it, and judging by the fact that this thing already made like 513 with the stage 4 cam, which again is not very big, and the MSD intake, and it's running all the way out to 7,000, which would help us with not making a really big torque number. I think we'd want to get away from that. And looking at the rods and stuff on the Gen 5, the only thing I don't know about are the pistons. I don't know about the strength on the pistons, so it'd be interesting to see. But I would like to find out. I want to do more testing on the fuel system with the Gen 5 stuff before we jump into a big bang one, because I don't want to run out of fuel. And if we only did like an LT4 pump and an LT4 injector, and then more feed and then more cam lobe, I don't think that's going to get us to where this motor can go when we go under boost. So I'll have to figure out some other fueling for it. So what are you guys doing? Make sure to go watch the video. Make sure to like. We got 20 likes and 60 people watching. Come on, everybody step up. I guess everybody must be out on a Friday night. Maybe I'm the only one that goes online and talks to people. Let's see, Exhaust Kings. I'm going to do a cam when I swap my 351. That'd be good. A 351 is definitely going to want camshaft. I mean, the stock cam in a 351 is as mild as the HO cam. In fact, if it came from a truck, it's probably smaller than the HO cam. Will a 58X engine start and misfire with the 24X ECU, or would it not start? I don't know that it will start at all, Mason. I've never tried that on a factory ECU. I know that when we have the Holley not configured properly for the trigger wheel on the crank, that it won't start. '83 Mustang 5.0. That is OG stuff. That's back when they first started. Was the 83 the 157 or the 175 horse one? Do you think a stage 2 BTR turbo cam is too much for daily driving? No, it's not too big. Although I would recommend and it depends on what size motor you have. If you have a 4.8, I wouldn't put that in there. I'd put a stage 1. Even a 5.3, I'd put a stage 1 in, because it's not gonna, the stage 1 or the stage 2 is not going to determine how much power you make. If you have a turbo, the turbo is going to do that. Yes, we do want to do more fuel systems on the L83. We need to get the potential up for the, we need to get the fuel flow up. And even if we have to augment it with port injection, which we can do. One of stuff and junk, one of the ways that I've done it in the past is when we need to clearance one, like on some of the big bang motors, I just go in there and just do a Dremel, and then we vacuum and blow everything out. It's obviously a lot easier when the motor's sitting on a stand. But the other way we'll do it is I'll use a Dremel, and then we'll use a vacuum while I'm using the Dremel. And we'll usually try to cover everything with a plastic bag and then tape it down so that all we're seeing is the one thing that we're working on. And then I'll use a vacuum. And as the chips are going, the vacuum actually sucks the chips up. You're still going to have to blow it out and stuff, but that gets like 95% of the stuff, and then you can blow out the rest of it. A little off topic, but let's get some more Buick 455 stuff. There's more Buick 455 stuff coming. Trubio, Richard, will you do a test on what horsepower loss on running accessories versus none? Take a look at the video. That's already up. Actually, I did all of the accessories test. Yeah, Dr. Differential, that's a lot going on. I think that we can get there with, we have, obviously the injectors are in the head, so we can put an intake manifold that has port injection on it already. We can get that from Holley, or we can make our own. I mean, there are a lot of ways to go there. So if we augment it with port injection, it's just going to take some tuning to make sure that it's going to work right. Trubio, that video is already up. I showed back to back what and not just all the accessories, what one of the accessories does. What each one of them do, actually. Tim says he's got $130 on his wallet. Send me a working 5.3 Gen 3 on Monday. So you want to buy a working 5.3 for $130? You're not stuff and junk. You're not licensed to operate a vacuum cleaner. You're not checked out on that. It says right in the thing that do not use heavy machinery. Do not operate heavy machinery. I'm hydrating enough. What size fuel injectors do you recommend for a twin turbo 5.3 liter twin 76s? What 76s are they? Are they like CX Racing 76s, or are they like, you know, S475 kind of 76s? What's the power output you're looking for? That will determine what the fuel injectors are. Tim, I'm still lost. What are you talking about? My 5.0 motor was from a 92 Thunderbird. Okay, that's an HO1. Ford only made 3,000 of them. Very similar to the 95 Mustang. Yeah, the intake's different on the T-Bird because of hood clearance, right? So if you want 900 horsepower and you have the twins that you were talking about, what are you going to run it on E85? If you're going to run it on E85, then you're going to need something bigger than 80s, like 1,000 cc's. We run all the way up to 1,500. If you're going to go over 1,000, it gives you room to spare with E85. What's a way you can add port injection to the L83? I think that who was it? Either Guatney or Crawford or one of those guys has some sort of piggyback deal that you can get from them to work with the factory ECU to augment it with port injection. Jim, you could run 80s, but you can't really get to 1,000 horsepower with 80s and E85. That's stretching them like to the limit. Seems odd on a Friday night. There's only 77 people watching. That seems weird. Exhaust King, you don't have to keep throwing money at it, man. Good luck on your project. Let me know if you have any questions, man. I'll help out. So my other question is, how many of you guys would be willing to take the motor apart and actually machine the lift, not machine them, but clearance the pistons in order to put the bigger cam in? If you guys saw the video, you know how much power, additional power the stage 4 cam is. It's a pretty good jump. So is that something that you would go through to put to be able to put that camshaft in? What what are you calling me? The channel's Richard, so that's fine. For a Gen 1 Coyote, what size injectors would you use for E85 and cams for NA stuff? And NA, you're going to be looking at, let's say that you were sizing your injector for 600 horsepower. That's probably not going to do that unless you really get after it with ported heads and an intake manifold on a Gen 1 Coyote. But let's say you size them for 600 horsepower. I don't know what the Coyote stuff come with. 16. Yeah, see, that's really only a 37-pound injector. So 40s would work fine. 40s or 42s or 45s would be more than enough. And I think I would go more than 37s. I would go like 45s or 50s. That way you could run E85 on it. The weather's beautiful out here. It's actually pretty warm. No, you're cutting a piston won't mess with the balance of the rotating cylinder. First of all, you're cutting all of them, so they should be even, right? And really, the amount that you're cutting off is next to nothing. You have to pull the head to get rid of the AFM lifters. So I'd be willing to Dremel the pistons if I knew for sure it was safe. Yeah, and again, if you're just careful with covering everything and then vacuuming it and blowing it out and stuff, it's all gonna be fine. Stuff and junk, you don't have to worry about the balance removal. We do that stuff all the time. Nope, balance is not an issue. Nick. 302, Brodex Track 1, solid roller, 258 at 50. That's a good size cam with 10 pounds of boost. Yeah, that will work fine. Yeah, Robert, if you're going to take it apart for ring gap and you're going to be adding boost to it, that's a perfect opportunity to machine the piston. How big can you make the lifter bore? Why do you want to make the lifter bore bigger? You want to put different lifters in it? Gothic, I actually don't know which one had a bigger difference between intake and exhaust profile. What's the rod saving zone in the timing map? It's going to be near the torque peak is where you're most concerned. And below. You don't want to have much timing below that either. If you pull the pistons, you don't have to change the bearings. We just reuse them, especially on a low mileage motor like that. We reuse stuff that has 200,000 or 300,000 miles on it. So the Gen 5 stuff is not going to have anywhere near that much. Camshafts are back ordered for 9 weeks, man. One last question. If you have a transmission question, I'm not the guy to ask about that. I can usually, if it has a CO2 solenoid, it should also be able to operate manually. What is the big chunk next to the intake valve on the 462 valve? I think it's a swirl vane. Bigger lifter boards would, Tom, you're saying bigger lifter boards would allow for off-center position? An off-center position of the lifter? How is that going to add piston to valve clearance? Tim, if that question is directed at me, we check bearing clearances whenever we build a motor. I don't ever check bearing clearances on a junkyard motor. And I don't ever remember having a set that were bad that we just replaced, but I certainly would. Jonathan, the thing that affects it, the way that the engine sounds, is exhaust duration primarily. How much power can I make with Snake-Eater 1000s? Well, it depends on how much static pressure you have and how much operating pressure you have. If you have a rising rate regulator and you have the same delta, let's say you have 60 psi, and if you're doing on E85, it's going to be near 1,000 horsepower. So here's a question. What do you guys think would be the two questions really? What do you think that the limit would be? What is the limiting thing on the Gen 5 motor if we're going to do a big bang on it? Obviously, we'll put head studs in it. It'll have MLS gaskets on it. It'll have the Gen 4 or the Gen 5 rods. Paul, what's up? You need to come in with a question, man. If you're going to come up with $15 and Paul's stepping up, which we like, then ask a question. But if we have a Gen 5, what do you guys think that the limiting factor will be if we try to do a big bang on it? Will it be the fuel system? Will it be the piston design? Will it be the connecting rod? For some reason, would it be the crankshaft? Is it the block? Let me know what you guys think. I think the Extreme Energy 274 and the Trick Flow are almost identical, Nick. Tom, can you really change the lifter position to that much to have a change? I mean, basically what you're trying to do is effectively change the rod the rod length basically by angling the push rod, but can you really change it that much? I mean, how off center can you get that thing? Almost Racing, you can, but I can't remember. God, it's been so long since we did any of those. I think there was a reason for people to leave that on there. That might be a good question for me to ask Brian Tooley. TEA did a lot of two valve heads for me back in the day. I'll have to ask him if that swirl vane needs to stay in there. What kind of camshaft do you want to see made for the Gen 5? I think that there's a lot of good stuff out there already, right? So you think the rods will let go? And then the injectors, of course. When you do a big bang, would it be good to run under load for a few hours? No. When do you ever run a motor at 1,500 horsepower for a few hours? And a stock motor that was designed to make, less than 400. That's an endurance test. That's a different thing. Oh, Field. So he's running low sevens. I don't know what mile an hour that's going to equate to, and I don't know what his weight is, but he's obviously making power. But if you switch over to port injection, that makes life easier, and that's one of our considerations. Mustang Crazy, Rich Crack Rods, and He Don't Care. It's a good song. It's catchy. And Tom, if you move it by 60 thousandths, how much will that change piston to valve? Like 5 or 10 thousandths, maybe? We need a 6.2 liter NA Big Bang. You won't do that. It won't break. It won't break. NA is not making enough power. Port injected Gen 5 versus Gen 4 power differences. Yeah, that would be interesting to see. I'd like to see what kind of power we could make running the Gen 5 with only port injection. I'm going to ask James at BTR if they can do that. The camshaft does drive the fuel pump with a lifter, yep. Now I'm excited about doing the I want to do some turbo testing with the typical LT4 stuff first, but I'm excited about maybe doing a big bang on that thing as long as we can get the fuel system right. Mika, yeah, it's normally 7 o'clock at night is when we do it. 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. How's everyone doing for Georgia? Any new snakes? Georgia would be a good place to go look for snakes. You guys there's a lot of good stuff back there. Most stuff I've been catching are rattlesnakes, which I don't care for as much. Yeah, Phil, that would make sense. 1,500. Is there a way to know if a cam will pull enough vacuum for brakes before purchasing? You kind of have to deal with the manufacturer on that. If you give them your displacement, your static compression, they can give you probably a pretty good idea. Jake wants to test Motorcraft variable Venturi carburetors. Man, I haven't seen one of those in a long time. My stepdad had one of those on his Bronco. DJ, that's a good question. I don't know what the flow rate is of the L83 DI injectors. I think that the guys from Lingenfelter had all of that stuff up, but I haven't looked at it for a really long time. The plunger has a limit to basically how much cam lobe you can put on it. But so there is a limit there, but we would use a combination probably of the two is what I'm thinking. Because I don't think you could get, well, we can't afford to put enough injector in there. I'm sure they would be enough pump and injector, because I'm sure those would be really, really expensive. And now most guys are probably not going to do that. Most guys would go the cheaper route, and the cheaper route probably would be to add port injection to it. Yeah, Kevin, take a look at the video, and thank you very much. But the same thing happens to a 5.7 Hemi when you don't have any oil in it as every other motor. If you look at the video that we did when I was doing the stuff with Chad, where we ran the motor at wide open throttle and then went out and pulled the drain plug out of it, and all the oil came out, it lasted 91 seconds at wide open throttle under full load. So that's actually a pretty long time. A Gen 5 short block with a Gen 3/4 head test. I don't know how easily that would bolt on. Jonathan, I'd have to talk to somebody a lot more educated than I am about the harmonics of that stuff. A lot of the external stuff is done so that you have adjustability, which works good. And then you want like what were the guys on the, I'm trying to think of, the crank trigger stuff actually is really, really good. Because then you don't have the attachment between the camshaft driving the distributor, so that you have a much better timing, but that's ignition timing. So all you're trying to do is get precision in there, so you don't have slop. And if you look at any LS motor, every chain that I've ever checked, whether it's brand new or has 100, 200, 300,000 miles on it, they all have a ton of slop in them. And I think that's why I was told that GM did that so that they could, so it's easy to install everything. So it goes on really easy. but I don't know if that's true. But then they went to the guide on the LS2 stuff and then the tensioner on the LS3 stuff because they're trying to take that slack out. So getting slack out would be a good idea. So that'd be one of the reasons why you would go to, you know, a gear-to-gear thing or hydro chains, double roller timing chains, belt drives. But the harmonics thing, I don't know. I'd have to look into that and see. I would like to put the 4.2 liter in the Nova. Mustang Crazy, we have a big aeromotive brushless pump that we use on the dyno when we're doing fuel injection. Otherwise, they have two big carbureted fuel pumps also. Brandon, I haven't run the L8T yet. I do want to do that because that's a kind of a cool motor. That would definitely be other guys. That would be an other guys Gen 5 motor. Any plans on testing the Gen 5 BTR truck cams? The L83 cams are basically that. And that video is up. You can change the clearance by the piston to valve clearance by 60 thousandths by moving the lifter 60 thousandths. That doesn't seem right. You're not changing the angle of the push rod that much. Will an XE284H and a 496 behave similar to an XE274 and a 454? Yeah, that probably would be close. No, I don't think it would seem like it's bigger than the 274 is on a 454. Tom, the exhaust valve timing is not what we're concerned with. We're concerned with the intake valve timing on the Gen 5. The Elaine LT5 cam specs, 551, 524, 200, 207. What sort of issue can you see for an L83? Nothing that cam would go in. You just need springs for that lift. But that cam wouldn't be a problem. That cam is similar to the that cam is actually similar to the LT1. I need to look at see. Let me look up some cam specs here. Can tell you what's going on. Yeah, the L86 DoD delete cam is a 200, 207. So that's real comparable to that. So the LT5 cam is not going to be dramatically different than an LT1. I don't know what the LSA is though on the LT5 cam. I would imagine it's fairly wide. Dennis, a torque cam, that BTR torque cam works really good in a 4.8. What valve lift does the stage 4 cam have? I don't, let's see. I think that the stage 4 cam is over 600. Brandon, the LT1 and the L83 and the L86 all have direct injection, but the LT5 actually has both. The big fancy supercharged motor has both. Thoughts on the Lingenfelter GT12 cam? I don't know what the specs are on that cam, and I've never tested it. But TrickFlow 205 heads on a 5.3 are always a win. Best mild cam for a 3rd gen LS1. I don't know what best mild cam means. Just tell me how much power you want to make. Yeah, you'll like the torque cam. We've even run lots of boost on a torque cam on a 4.8, and it works pretty well. JV, when we run something like that, an LS2 with ported 243s and the head cam intake and all that stuff, it normally wants 29 degrees of total timing at the horsepower peak. But we run it fairly cold, so you might not be able to do that in the car. Humongous 227, 235, 50, 614, 621. Yes, that cam will work good on a 5.3. It's going to make power at the top of the RPM range, but and especially with the 205 head. And I'm hoping that you have a fast intake manifold on that, or at least a Trailblazer SS. If you want to make spunky, do you want to make 400 wheel horsepower or 400 flywheel horsepower? Because 400 flywheel horsepower, any camshaft in an LS1 is going to get you that. Okay, 102. Yeah, that you're going to be doing just fine with that cam. That's going to be like the comp, the 454 cam. That's a 227. That's got more exhaust duration. It's a 227, 243, I think, if I remember right. But it's going to be like that. That one will actually be a little bit better down low, and then lose just a little bit at the top, probably compared to that comp cam. Can you give me an idea of cam springs you use for the LT5? You should talk to Brian Tooley about that. Brian has one of those, and they've run some stuff on the dyno with it, and so he probably would give you a better idea. Okay, so you want 400 wheel horsepower. So you want 500 horsepower from a 5.7. That's not too hard. And now, Nick, I can't remember what you had in terms of what your other things were. If it 243 heads are going to be a little bit hard to do that with, but so you need a pretty good sized camshaft. And the one that we were just talking about, that Lingenfelter GT2 or GT12 cam, or the comp 54-454-11, that's a 227, 243, and that probably would get you near that power level with a LS1. Joey, you have a super heavy 2017 Silverado, 37-inch tires, two-wheel drive, Gen 5, 427 Texas speed, mixed 900 on pump and methanol. Is it got a blower or something on it? I don't think that makes 900 on pump and methanol NA, right? So it's got some kind of blower on it. If it does, then a 342 gear probably would be fine. Although that's a pretty tall tire. Any behind-the-scenes info on the comp LSC turbo cam? It worked good. I don't know. I mean, you saw what the dyno results were. That's what I provide. Is I just do a back-to-back test and tell you what happened. Josh, and this is a question that I get a lot. Just a general cam question. If the heads you're using are done gaining flow at 450 to 500 lift, like for instance a Vortec head, a Vortec small block Chevy head, would it be beneficial to keep the cam around 500 lift for valve train stability? The valve train stability has nothing to do with what the head flow is doing. And you can run more lift in the camshaft and the head, and you'll still gain power even if the head flow levels off, and even if it starts going down past that lift number. So like if you stall at 450 and 500 and it goes down at 550, you can still gain power from running a 550 lift cam, because the thing is you've added a whole nother section of flow, and it's only at 550 once during while it's opening and closing, but now you've added another 500 number on the other side of it. So you've gained like average flow, and that works. It doesn't work all the time, but it can work. So there are a lot of guys that's a hard and fast rule for them. Oh, this thing only flows to 550 lift. I only need a 550 lift cam, and that's not true. Perry, that's not a lot of camshaft for a 383. So if you 450 crank horsepower is going to need a decent head. If you know an airflow research enforcer, or is kind of the low buck approach, or a Pro Max or Skip White, those kind of things, or the Trick Flow Super 23 head works really good too. I'm looking for a good David Cover cam for my LQ4. 70 ported 799s. 64, 28, a 6,500 pound 2500. So you're gonna want something small, like a stage 2 truck cam probably would work good for that, Woodies. We have a twin LS1 mud truck. Does that mean there are two LS1s in the mud truck, or is it a twin turbo LS1 in the mud truck running 38-inch paddle, staying on top of the mud, takes 1,000 horsepower? You must be slinging a lot of mud though, 2,000 if you're down in the mud. That stuff gets really heavy, and if you want tire speed to stay on top of it and you're moving a lot of mud, that takes a lot of power. The shaft mount rocker, George, is not going to add any power if you test it on the motors that we normally run, like a junkyard run. You might see something at really high RPM. You might not. There might just be stability there. Perry, a 1.6 rocker might help, but just make sure that you have enough valve spring to try that. Sometimes that gains it, and sometimes it doesn't. You would be better off if is the 270H a Magnum cam? You'd be better off with an extreme energy cam profile. Jeffrey, the low shock technology thing is the surface finish that they're doing is really nice, but they're also trying to make the cam more stable, something I'm sure that they've learned on the Spintron. And typically when you make the cam more stable, you also will trade power, but it's a trade I would be willing to make. And all of the other cam guys that have Spintrons, like Brian Tooley, they know this, and you can get real aggressive on the ramp rates, and you can have it make more power. But the problem is it like kills parts if you do that. And so that's not a good trade-off. If you have a camshaft that only lasts 5,000 miles, it kills something, either a valve or a lifter, which is pretty common, or the camshaft itself. It doesn't matter that there's an extra 8 or 10 horsepower if it just destroys itself. Plans for a ProCharge Gen 5 L83. We could do that. I'd rather do turbos, but a ProCharge one would work as long as we can get the fueling requirements. Dustin, I actually don't like that sloppy stage 2 cam. I think in an LQ4, it'd be better than it is in a 5.3 and a 4.8, because then you might get away without having to put a converter in it in a 6-liter. but that cam definitely needs a converter in a 4.8, and I would argue that it also needs one in a 5.3. Cool. So it is a dual motor thing. That's pretty cool, Tom. Boosted Dad has a Gen 3 LS with Texas Speed dumpster fire cam and TS dual springs, 1000cc snake eaters, 320 liter per hour pump, eBay GT45. Elaine, the motor did have phaser limiters in it, but in the small cams that they are running, other than the stage 4, they're probably not necessary. Boosted 500 wheel horsepower is pretty easy with that GT45 turbo. Bradley, an F1A94 will support 1200. We've done that before. I think we've done 1300 with it on a big block. And it will work good for a street engine. Just know that, like every centrifugal blower, it'll have a rising boost curve, so it won't have a lot of boost down at 3,000 RPM. And I don't know how high you're revving it, but at 6,500, let's say, or 7,000, then it will have its maximum boost up there. Texas Speed Stage 2 cam would work on the LQ4. Yep. The BTR stuff is fun. It's always good to get back and see Brian. Even if I wasn't going back there and doing videos and we weren't doing dyno testing, I would go back there and see him, because he's just good people. And the rest of the guys back there, especially in the dyno area, are just awesome. Dr. Differential, 1000cc injector is not a problem on a. It's better if you're doing it on E85, just because you would be flowing more fuel, but you should be able to idle that down. I don't remember what size the motor was that you were doing that on, but if the bigger the motor is, the better, because the more fuel you're supplying. The truck is called the Hillbilly Bootlegger Turbo LS1 with the bootlegger cams. So the bootlegger, the Lenati ones, the Lenati bootlegger cams. Josh, we talked about that. Actually, the guys from Bardstown Bourbon were saying that they could make a lot more. This is just the first batch of stuff that they gave to them, so they know that they can go to the 190 level, like Everclear is, because I've run that, not run it in a car, but we've sampled it before. What turbo would you recommend for a Cam 5.3? Grant, how much power do you want to make? You're looking at a 78, 75 probably, if you're trying to make a lot of power, or an S475. I wouldn't put a T6 on it though for that application. Is it worth walnut blasting a 75,000 mile Gen 5 LT1 that shows no drivability issues? No, you shouldn't have to do that. 75,000 miles is a little bit, but if the thing runs and runs good, then you can run some of the cleaner stuff down. Lucas has some, and there's lots of different guys that have it. So you can just spray that stuff in the intake and foam it, and get the, if you want to try to get the buildup off the valve, if there is any. Brandon, I don't know what the overbore capability is on the Gen 5 stuff. I'm rebuilding a 5.3 Gen 3 for my O2 Silverado. I'm looking at a BTR Stage 2 with long tube headers, no cats. Will this ruin the drivability for a daily driver and towing? I myself, for a 5.3, I would put a Stage 1 in there, but lots of guys like the Stage 2 stuff. Racer D, you can tell how good your cam is by looking in the intake manifold. I think he's talking about the buildup in there. But if you look at any LS manifold, even a stock one, which has obviously, has no overlap, it's filled with oil. That's part of the PCV. Mr. Bull, have you ever done a test on L83 intake test with a BTR 102 intake and ran up to 8,000? A couple things there. There would be no comparison between an LS3 intake and the BTR short runner intake. They're designed for completely different things. The LS3 intake is designed for like a 6,500 RPM power range. That's where it's going to have optimized power production. The short runner BTR manifold is way above that, so that you would use them for different things. If you were running an LS3 manifold up to 8,000, you wouldn't be making any power. It's way on the fall off side for that runner length. And conversely, if you're running a BTR intake and you want to run it at 3,000 RPM, it's going to be way down compared to a fast manifold because it's the wrong RPM for that manifold. Yeah, Josh, sampling the 190 proof like Everclear stuff is not is not something people continue to do. I don't think they continue to do that and stay around very long. Tim, what's tight about the aluminum Gen 5 blocks? Is it the bearing clearance is really tight on them, or the piston to wall clearance? What gets tight on them? Grant, you can actually step down the 3-inch, just smash it and put a T4 flange on it. It's not going to hurt anything. Woody's, I'll put my email address down there for the PayPal thing. It's not necessary. Obviously, I'm happy to answer your questions. Let's see. Make sure I take my caps off. Yes, that is correct. There you go. Do we think 155 proof moonshine? Well, fastest pendant, that's what this was that we tested. It was between 155 and 160. And it doesn't compare to E85, and it wouldn't compare to it under boost because it's making way less power, and it's using a lot more fuel. So you need to get rid of the water. And I think going up toward the 190 level would make it better. Tom, I haven't even got one of the Dodges yet from the wrecking yard. There's so many other motors I have to get done first. Mr. Bull, what's up? Oh, the liners are tight. Okay. So are those aluminum motors more like the LS1 and LS2 and LS3 that we just can't overbore? They're not like a L33. Simple Mods has been thinking about push rods and VTEC. I like it. I like where this is going. If the tappet was inside a sliding sleeve, tap would run the lobe and sliding sleeves could ride the outer VTEC lobe, locking them both together for engagement. Just whip that up really quick and get it running, and let's see if it works. Rex, what's going on? Friday night doesn't seem to be a very good night for the for people watching. I think that this is the lowest number we've seen. Where's everybody at? Are they all out partying, or are they like? Hopefully, they're all out working on their cars. That's what I'm hoping. Linwood, the GM still sells small block Chevy crate motors, so they're still around. Yeah, it is good weather out there. It's beautiful outside. Woody's, that's much appreciated. There are lots of guys who will come and you know, not partake. They'll come and just take. I know it's nice that the restrictions are going away. Lisa and I have gone out, and you know, you actually get to go out to in a restaurant and all. It's nice that that's gone away. My boys are both playing sports and stuff, so it's kind of cool. Mr. Bull, let me know what happens when you guys go on the dyno. Is there any difference in potential max power using E85 versus C16? I would say yes, because the C16 has much higher octane, but I'm not because, but it doesn't have the cooling and it doesn't make as much power at the same boost level as E85. So I guess the answer is I'm not sure. The thing that I want to compare, and I haven't overlaid it yet, and I'm thinking of doing a video on it, is we made I've made 500 horsepower, a little more than 500 horsepower with the heads, cam, and intake 5.3 LM7 style motor. And now the Gen 5 is made over 500 with, it obviously has a good head already, so it has a benefit, it has more compression, but with a cam and intake. So I want to, and I haven't overlaid those yet to see how they compare, to see if one has, like, I'm thinking that the Gen 5 is going to have a lot more average torque production. But it'll be interesting to see and talk about what it takes to get 500 out of each one of those. Excuse me, nothing about me. Thank you very much. Get yourself a frosty beverage for all that. There's nothing better than a frosty cold beverage, except having one with my wife, Lisa. Oh, is it buffering? Are there going to be any boosts coming soon for the Gen 5 motors? I hope so. We're just trying to work out the fuel system. Richard just bought an LM7 swapped F body after tapping rings. Should I do any upgrades to the 706 valve train before turboing? Yeah, I'm hoping that you have some kind of camshaft in there, and if you do, you should have valve springs too. At least some sort of beehive upgrade or a dual spring. Tim, actually, when I was there, Brian, the guys from Brian Tooley Racing had already ordered an LT2 intake manifold. It wasn't available when I was there for the test, but they are going to test that to find out how it compares. Nick, is it possible to spin a centrifugal supercharger and control it with a boost controller instead of having a rising boost curve? You're not going to control it with a boost controller. The way that they do it is they overspeed the blower so it spins the heck out of it, and then they'll bleed off stuff at the top. So they'll regulate the boost, and the only thing that will happen is, like, you have a rising boost curve, and what they're trying to do is you're going to elevate the whole boost curve, so it's going to come up a little bit sooner, but it's not at all like it's not anything anywhere near like a turbo does. You can improve it, but you can't make it do what a turbo does or what a positive displacement blower does. Jeffrey, take a look at the turbo exhaust video that I have up. That should give you a pretty good idea of the changes in power. Tom, what LS combo will give you 500 foot-pounds and 500 horsepower NA? It had to be a big one. Have you done or know of any testing of 4032 and 26Q8 pistons? What is a 26Q8? Chris, we did test the MSD intake on the Gen 5, and it worked well. I mean, it works well on the top because it's a short runner deal. And also, Holley has a high ram that has is set up for port injection for the Gen 5 as well. Rigged in Jimmy Garage, can you run 11.9 static compression with an 8.8 dynamic compression on 91 octane? Well, the dynamic compression is not the thing that's going to determine whether or not that's going to detonate. It's not the only thing. There are a lot of things that are going to determine whether that, if you soften the chamber, you could probably get away with more than that. You could probably get away with a higher dynamic. If you take timing out of it, you can easily run it on 91, but then it's not really going to make a whole bunch of power. So a lot of guys live and die by this dynamic compression thing, and they don't realize that I mean, the air temperature can change it, the water temperature can change it, the shape of the chamber, the shape of the piston, hot spots, bad fuel, all kinds of things can change whether or not that's going to work or not. Yeah, Tim, for us, we're not going to run a big bore on the L83. We would just run it stock anyways. But can guys put the 4-inch cranks in the Gen 5s? Fascist pendant, the variable speed stuff, the guys from ProCharger did that. So they have like an internal box, a step ratio basically, and that works okay. And they have it so that it's kind of computer controlled. I was never able to test one of those. We asked them a number of times, but I was never able to do that. But it was a fairly small blower that they had it attached to. Gray, I think that they ran factory lifters. I think that they got rid of the DoD lifters and put the standard lifters in. Yes, the rising boost curve can be beneficial on the street for traction and driveline savior. Yeah, I don't, Chris, if you're talking about the alloys in the forging, I thought that that's what the 4032 was. I didn't know what the other one was. I didn't realize it was a typo. But the only way, it would be much easier to test those from a metallurgical standpoint, do a breakage test or a stress test, than it would be to run them both on the motor. I'd have to find out what the expansion rates are on both of those to find out if they need different. Again, here's another issue: is that if the expansion rate's different, then you put different piston to wall clearance in, then they have different amounts of blow by, and it's a whole thing. Cranking compression is also not an indicator of detonation. I take that back. It's an indicator, but it's not the whole thing. Grant, sometimes we see nothing when we go from a T6 to a T4. I have that video up, and it depends on where you are in the range of the turbo relative to the range of the flow rate of the exhaust of the hot side. So when we went from a T6 to a T4, we just essentially saw no change at all. Mr. Bull, that sounds like a good combination. How do I get over 300 horsepower out of a 1988 IROC Z28 5.7? That should only be a cam. You should have headers on it. You could do some stuff to the air inlet on it, but that motor was rated at 240. I don't know what year it is. 1988. So the thing is probably only rated at 230 or 235, I think. Might not be able to get that with just a cam. Better heads would definitely do it. Do you have iron heads on that? Or do you have the L98 heads on it? A little bit of porting on the L98 heads would help. The CVT transmission is kind of what they look up ProCharger. You could see what they did. Great. I don't know if they share that, if they share the same lifter. I have to talk to Brian about that. Brandon, you need to stop asking the same question. Racer, how much cranking compression do I need to light off E85 or methanol? I don't know that there's an absolute number for that. We've run E85 on really low compression stuff with big cams and high compression stuff with bigger cams, and if the ignition system is working good, it lights off just fine. Jarrett, we got we did testing on the L86 when I was back with Brian. They did L86 stuff and LT1 stuff. I'm going to be putting the LT1 stuff up on the thing, so that we did, because the difference between the LT1 and the L86, they're the same motor. They just have a different intake manifold on them. So we ran different camshafts on that. They ran ported heads on it. They ran different cams, obviously, in that. And they even machined the pistons and stuff, too. So it all worked out good. Why would I never run methanol with less than 235 PSI of cranking compression? I'm not the guy to ask about methanol, having never run it on anything other than when Mahovitz was there. But I don't know why you would. I don't know why the crank, because you can get cranking compression out of lots of different combinations of camshaft and static compression. And if you're running methanol, you don't want to have a mild cam in it. Will I need a stall converter if I put a stage 2 cam in an L83? I don't think so. The stage 2 that we tested, I think you're fine. I mean, none of those lost power compared to the stock cam. Jason, talk to the guys at BTR. You have a 408 with a Trick Flow Gen X 225 head. That's good. Take a look at the 6-liter test I have up, or the 408 test I have up that has the airflow research heads on it, which would probably be a little bit better than those 225s. But we ran 4 different camshafts in that 408, and it had a fast manifold on it, so it was a good combination. You could kind of see what. I mean, I think that thing made 625 or something like that. But that was probably a 459 or a 469 cam. The simple mods, the stuff that we think about when I get together with guys like Brian, the stuff that we would like to test and then decide that we shouldn't spend the next 2 weeks on testing something just because we would want to know the answer and it would not benefit us in any way, shape, or form. There's a lot of cool stuff. Like I can tell you one of them was that because Westech has 2 dynos, everybody has asked, and this is the way SAE did a lot of their testing. So people want to know, well, how much loss is there from running the turbo on one? So we were going to duct the piping all the way from one dyno, or at least this was my idea, duct the piping from one dyno cell all the way over into the other one to run the boost on the other motor that would be the same to 5.3 liters. And so that way we could run the motor and find out how much loss is. We could run them NA, and then we could run them boosted and run them boosted with one feeding the other one. But okay, well, what is I don't know, 20 or 30 foot length of pipe? You know, how much does that take away? So it's a whole new thing. I wanted to do it for fun, but the guys at Westech were like, yeah, I don't think that's probably going to work. Last question, J Mav, any suggestions on a cam for a single turbo 70 millimeter 5.3 pulling a trailer? Yeah, the torque cam actually works really well for that application. Anything small, stage 1 truck cam. Tom, I have been offered lots of jobs actually, but I'm not doing that anymore. Gray, we did run stock injectors. So I got to get going, guys. Thank you all for showing up. I'll be back tomorrow. Interesting. I'm gonna have to take a look. I'm gonna take a look back through the history of the live feeds and see which days are better than others, and maybe we need to think about limiting them if you know, people are not going to show up. I feel slighted. I could be out. I could be out at the bars. Not that I would be there. Thanks for showing up, guys. I will see you all tomorrow.